most people overlook or miss altogether the main reason that their relationship falls apart after the honeymoon phase, right? We think so often, or the first thing people will say is, oh, well, it's because I was dating their representative. And then after, they got in good with me and my guard was down, they showed their true colors, right? And they went left on me, or, they stopped being the person they were in the beginning and they switched up and they changed. And, all the things we used to do, we don't do anymore. And all this other stuff happens. And then it starts, relationship issue row, right? You start this ongoing trail of problems and never ending issues and conflicts and head butting and communication issues, and all the things starts happening. But what doesn't get talked about is the main reason why this happens so often, right? And I'm gonna tell you, it's not because the representatives are showing up and people are, bamboozling you or just intentionally trying to gaslight you. And I'm not saying there's not people out there that do intentionally gaslight, right? But you'll find it's less often, less common that someone that makes it to a space or stage of actually wanting to be in a committed relationship with you and going across that threshold, right? Going that far when they were intentionally trying to, love bomb you, right? It usually doesn't even make sense. Someone that typically has the goal of love bombing, where they're really trying to use you, right, to their advantage. They want to get everything they can from you without committing to you long term. They set up the hopes and the dreams of there being this committed future, and you never actually get there, right? So that's usually less of the equation. But the main reason relationships tend to fall apart, or maybe your relationship is falling apart since the honeymoon phase, is because you are not showing up unapologetically yourself fully and truly from the beginning, right? And understand what I mean when I say that. I don't mean you're showing up trying to put forward the representative people talk about, because like I've said in the previous video, that representative analogy kind of suggests someone trying to be fake or trying to put on an act or trying to, do all and say all the right things. I don't mean that. I mean, you are not showing up the full spectrum of who you are and who you are through and throughout, who you've crafted yourself to be. And this is a loaded thing, so let me try to, be as concise as I can whenever I break this down. So I'm not saying that you're showing up and you're trying to withhold some parts of yourself and, and only, be the great part of yourself. I'm saying you're letting your excitement, your desire for this to go well, and maybe your attraction to this other person start to tinker with and manipulate how you would show up if this was just a lifelong person you've known from the rip, like there was a sibling of yours, right? To where it's not a conscious thing that you're trying to do, but you're subconsciously not carrying out through that equation as organic and natural as you typically would. You're probably being a lot more mindful of the things you say. You're trying to make sure, most likely, that you don't give a poor impression or a bad impression. Or I guess better way to say it is, this is how you probably approached it in the beginning. If you're already in a relationship that has seemed to sour since the honeymoon phase, to where you back then were aware of maybe your previous relationships and your role sometimes that contributed to the issues you had in those relationships, to where you didn't want to repeat that this time with this new person that, oh my gosh, seems so awesome and so much better than all the rest of the people you've been with. So you're mindful of your tongue more, right? In this experience, you're more optimistic, right? And watch this. You're being way more optimistic than you typically are. Why? Because you don't have past baggage with this person, to where you're thinking in a different frame or a different state than you usually do, when maybe you tend to be more of a pessimistic person or overly cautious generally, right? But in this equation, because this person is putting on such a good first impression, or you're attracted to them enough, it's pulling out of you the parts of yourself, right? Like I've addressed in videos about the representative, that actually have existed the whole time, but you haven't done the work for that to be what's in the forefront the whole time. And the biggest piece I'm trying to land the plane on here, when I say unapologetically you, I mean you focused more on the pleasantries in the beginning of this relationship dynamic than you did giving full authenticity, full transparency of everything that is you in this experience. And I don't mean that in the sense of you start dating them, or when you first started that phase of getting to know them in the honeymoon phase, that you're supposed to be trying to throw everything at them so they can see everything, right? And just kind of overwhelming them, and just, just trying to force parts of yourself out there, that maybe the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything else, so that they see it all. No, but you're not flowing through that experience as organic as it will be if it wasn't, something on the line to be built or to potentially mess up, right? And the reason why I'm narrowing down on this is because whenever we don't show up unapologetically ourselves, right, when we're not trying to be so pleasant and make sure we don't offend the other person because I don't know you yet, right? So I don't want you to feel bad about something I say. I don't want you to say something the wrong way because I don't know how you receive things yet. And we want to be mindful of that kind of stuff. But you have to ask yourself, if I can't just speak the way I speak, can't be the way I am, don't, not do or do some things that I do or don't tend to do, and that's not okay for you, then you're just not my person, right? But whenever you're so focused on wanting this to go well, sometimes you suppress or water down parts of yourself, or sometimes you ramp them up. Sometimes you try to get yourself all, matched to the same frequency or the same state that you see they're in, because you like that state that they're in. You like the energy they're bringing. And it's really something that you possess within you, but you haven't done the work to live as that day in and day out. So now you're trying to match it with them, but you haven't put the reps in the gym to be able to keep it up consistently now, to where now they're getting a certain impression of you that doesn't reflect what's normal and most comfortable to you. And then what's the next thing that happens from there? Usually when someone's not being unapologetically themselves, take it or leave it, right, for the other person, what winds up happening is you stop living by your own standards. Remember, standards is not just a thing that you call out and say, hey, this is what I require, right? For someone to be in my life, or yeah, this is the way things I require to live the way I feel I'm supposed to live, right? The kind of place I'm supposed to live in, the kind of car I'm supposed to drive, and all that. Standards is a way of being, right? Meaning your identity. You identify with your standard. This is why people feel really sad and depressed when they're living beneath their own standards, because your standard is you in tangible form, right? These are things required to happen for you to be happy, healthy, and whole, to feel fulfilled, to feel full, your glass full, to be yourself fully and truly, right? And so whenever you show up in that honeymoon phase and everything's all rainbows and gumdrops, right? So often what gets left behind is the parts of you that maybe aren't so peachy, the sides of you, the things you experience that maybe put you in bad moods or spaces. And so being fair, right? If you're just having positive experiences, you haven't learned enough about each other yet to even get to that, I understand. But that's why you have to be self-aware enough to know, okay, well, this is great and this is awesome. I'm also recognizing there's some elements of how my typical day would go, or typical week, that is not being represented here. And by me not finding a way to at least bring it into the fold, or bring light to the fact that it can be a thing whenever everything isn't so peaches and cream, I need to do that so I can make sure that I'm getting to see how I blend with this person, with all aspects of me in the equation, not just the fun and good ones. But at the same time, on the other side, you got to ask yourself, all right, if they don't get to see some of these parts of me and sides of me, am I not hindering their ability to understand who I am truly, to feel confident and good that if they continue to be here and stay here, that they're doing it knowing the full puzzle, not just all the shiny pieces that look great? And if that's the case, right? Then the same need be said about the other side, because here's the piece. Whenever you start thinking like that and you're making sure that you are being unapologetically yourself, then now you instinctively start to ask yourself, well, are they doing the same? Are they being unapologetically them? And it makes it easier to dial in when you see some elements or areas where it's seeming like you're not getting to see the full picture when it comes to their side, right? And I'm saying all this because it's all about how you start, right? How you start typically dictates how you finish. So if you don't come into the equation being comfortable being yourself, no matter what the situation is, then it's a good chance that you're going to adjust and assimilate to whatever the experience that you're in is that's not reflective of what sits on you best, or at least sits on you most comfortably. Let me not say best, because you can find someone that makes you want to be better, which is awesome. You should want to have someone in your life that inspires you to be better. But don't try to take on building and get into a space of commitment with someone that maybe inspires you to be that way, but you haven't mastered the patterns, the skills, the tools, the habitual system, the conditioning in order to sustain that for the long term. And when you don't do that, you set yourself up for failure. But here's the thing. If you didn't do that, there's a great chance that your partner didn't either, right? See, the honeymoon phase takes two for it to be the honeymoon phase. You both have to be adding to the rainbows and gumdrops experience. And so if you didn't show up unapologetically yourself and operating by way of your standards and not flexing on that, right? Living in your truth the whole time to where they get to see all of it, right? And see how they respond to it and seeing if that matches and meshes with them as well. If you haven't done that, then now you don't get to see if you're doing the same thing for them in return, right? And if you didn't, more likely than not, they didn't do the same thing. Just like I was just saying, when you are living that way, then now it becomes a lot more obvious whenever you can see elements of the other person that they're not doing it if they're not. And so whenever you don't show up that way and you made it to the space of a committed relationship for it to even fall apart, right? They must have been doing something similar, because if they were living by that same ideology, right, they would notice in you that you were not being fully true to yourself and all those things, right? They would pick up on that because they are being it. They're living in their truth fully and transparently. So therefore, it's easier for them to detect when someone else is not, because there's certain elements that aren't at play or aren't in the puzzle whenever you're not being fully you. But I guess that brings me to the last point here that I'll wrap the video up on, which is, in order for you to show up unapologetically yourself, the first thing or most important thing you have to be able to do is find full acceptance and peace with being you fully and truly. See, the reason why so many people show up and they easily slip into the representative role and they're all happy and giddy and they're putting their best foot forward, right? And it's not reflective of the norm, the everyday life of who they are, is because you haven't found enough of a peace and a landing space with being fully you. You haven't accepted being fully yourself and living in your truth fully yet. That's uncomfortable for you to do. Maybe because of how you feel people will look at you or judge you if you do, or, what you'll lose out on if you are just fully yourself, who you may offend, everything but just being true to yourself and fully embracing yourself and saying, hey, I see and love you enough and so much to where I'm willing to put you on display in front of anyone and be okay about it. And however they choose to respond to who you truly are, you're okay with it because they're either proving that they're for you and for your life, or they're not and they don't need to be in your life. They don't contribute to it because you don't work for them and they don't work for you. But that's a different level of acceptance you have to reach before you can actually be unapologetically yourself. So if you actually do accept and embrace yourself fully to be yourself unapologetically, then comes the last little tier, which is deciding, how does true me operate in society, in public, right? And therefore, since we're talking about the relationship side of it, how does true me unapologetically operate in my relationship or relationships going forward if the one I'm in currently is having a hard time? And if you are in a relationship that kind of started going off the rails after or since the honeymoon phase, then the first thing you need to do is get aligned with What is my core truth? Who am I really in the unapologetic way? How does that person show up? And how do I start being that from this day going forward? And what kind of conversations may need to happen with my partner to get on the same page about, hey, who I actually am versus maybe the impression they got, and have the same dialogue in return about them. Because it's only when you actually get clear on your true clarity of who you are and what aligns with your best that you can actually have a dialogue about that with your partner to do the same, to come to actual and a valid and vetted overall truth as to where you both stand in respect to each other, and whether you work for each other for the long haul, or whether you realize this wasn't meant to go the mile because neither of us was being unapologetically who we are. If you need help with the self-discovery journey to really learn how to be comfortably and confidently unapologetically you, so you can make sure when you find that person that's great for you, that the honeymoon phase lasts a long time and is sustainable in some way versus something that's short-lived and then it goes a whole other direction, or to get your relationship back on track, if your partner's willing to do the same, then email or DM me the word coaching and we'll get the work, as long as you're truly ready to put the work in. If you're not ready for one-on-one coaching, don't have the time or the space, that's okay. At least email or DM me the word revival to join my Relationship Revival Hub community, where you can learn the same things I teach my clients one-on-one at your own pace on your own time. Either way, do something to get in the race. Let's get it.